My name is Ethan Miller. I'm 96 years old, and while my ears are still sharp and my eyes mostly clear, my memory gets a bit fuzzy these days. The sycamore leaves in the yard outside my window are falling again. I run my fingers over the rusted part of an old Colt 45 I keep on a nightstand, and in a flash, I'm seeing that late autumn again, my daddy pushing a wheelbarrow with a 50-pound sack of cornmeal, bringing 5-year-old Abigail Hayes to our place in Stone Creek Hollow. Abigail was a distant cousin of mine, or so they said. Her daddy, a no-account gambler, had lost everything. Word was he was going to sell her to a brothel down in Oak Haven, the county seat, just to get some cash. My daddy sat on our doorstep, smoked 3 pipefuls of his strong tobacco, then suddenly knocked his corncob pipe against the grindstone. "Sarah," he said to my mama, "that Carter girl, I'm taking her. She could be a helpmate for our Ethan when they're grown." I was 8 then. Abigail was skinny as a beanpole, clutching Mama's skirt and too scared to say a word. Later, I found out that sack of cornmeal was nearly half a year's worth of food for a whole family. The day Abigail came to Stone Creek Hollow, Mama took her tattered little coat apart and sewed in fresh cotton batting. Abigail would squat by the hearth, feeding wood into the cook stove, the firelight dancing on her little face, smudged with soot. One time, I snuck her half a piece of cornbread I'd saved. She jumped back like a startled rabbit, and the cornbread fell in the dirt. Mama picked it up, brushed it off. "Take your time, child," she said gently. "Ain't nobody gonna snatch it from you." Abigail reached out a trembling hand, took it, and ate it slowly, like she'd never tasted anything so good in her life. At night, I'd hear crying from the little lean-to room. Abigail would be curled up in the corner of her cot, wrapped in a quilt patched so many times it was mostly patches. Mama sighed one evening. "Ethan," she said, "Abigail's going to be your woman one day. You got to look out for her." I nodded, not really understanding, but from that day on, I'd break my breakfast biscuit in half and give her a piece before I left for the one-room schoolhouse. And so the days went by, and I protected Abigail like she was my own little sister. When I was 16, I'd become something of a leader among the young men in Stone Creek Hollow. Silas Blackwood, the local big shot who owned half the county, had fenced off the community well, the only reliable source of fresh water for miles. We marched up there with our pitchforks and axe handles to have it out with him. Blackwood's hired guns were there with their shotguns. I grabbed the sharpest sickle from the shed, one-eyed honed myself, and stood at the front. "If this well ain't open to everyone by sundown," I declared, "my blood will be on this well stone." The cicadas shrieked under the July sun. Beside Stone Creek Hollow's only Sweetwater well, I, 16 years old, was rubbing the rust from the sickle's edge with my thumb. This old well, cut into a limestone slab, its rim still bearing the nicks I'd made as a boy skipping stones, was now barricaded with rough sawn planks. 2 of Blackwood's men, armed with shotguns, leaned against a big oak, their barrels glinting in the sun. "Ethan, my ma says if we don't get water soon, the grits are going to turn to mud in the pot," 15-year-old Cody Tiger, Evans said, his knuckles white around a cracked dipper. I looked up. About 20 folks from the hollow had gathered behind me. The old men tapped their empty canteens, and the women held earthenware jugs that clinked softly. Old man Hemlock, 70 if he was a day, was coughing so hard he could barely stand, but he gripped his hoe tighter than any youngster. "Remember," I said, my voice low, "we don't start anything." I tucked the gleaming sickle into the back of my overalls. My rough-spun shirt was already soaked with sweat, revealing a sun-darkened neck. But we ain't going to be pushed around, neither. I strode to the barricade. A splinter tore at my palm, and a drop of blood hit the limestone, startling a reflection of a cloud in the well water below. Thwack! A shotgun but slammed against the fence, making everyone jump back. The lead enforcer, a brute named Scarface Lenny, shoved his gun barrel through a gap. "Tired of living, boy?" "Mister, Blackwood says this here water is by the barrel for a share of your crop. 1 barrel of water for 3 pecks of corn." Before he could finish, I grabbed his shirt front, the sickle's cold edge against his throat. 3 pecks? That how you figured it when Mr. Blackwood drove Mr. Peterson to his grave last fall during the drought? A woman's cry erupted from the crowd. Mrs. Peterson, clutching a cracked pitcher, pushed to the front. "My husband just went to ask for a drink, and your men broke 3 of his ribs." She tore open her blouse, revealing a horrifying, discolored bruise under the harsh sun. Scarface Lenny's shotgun barrel started to tremble. The other hired gun fumbled to cock his weapon, but I swung the sickle, hitting his gun stock hard, sending sparks into a pile of dry leaves. "If this barricade ain't down today," I yelled, planting my foot on the hot well stone, the sickle point flicking open Lenny's collar. "Then my blood will seep into this well. Let everyone in Stone Creek Hollow see if drinking water tainted with a poor man's blood makes Silas Blackwood's conscience rot." The veins in my neck pulsed. Blood dripped from a sickle onto the wooden sign nailed to the barricade, "Property of S. Blackwood," smearing the painted letters into dark red scars. The sound of hoes and pitchforks began to beat a rhythm. Tiger and some other boys dragged a heavy millstone to block the path. Old Man Hemlock banged his pipe on the fence. "When this well was dug, your Mr. Blackwood never lifted a single spadeful of dirt." From the shadows by the well, someone shouted, "Tear it down." 20 pairs of arms surged forward like a wave of wheat. My sickle was caught on Lenny's belt buckle. I used the leverage to kick down a section of the fence. The smell of rotting wood and cool well water hit my face. A shotgun clattered to the ground. Scarface Lenny scrambled backward, knocking over a bucket of sun-warmed water under the oak. I bent down, cupped my hands, and splashed well water on my face. Salty blood mixed with the cool liquid dripping through my fingers. I wiped my mouth and laughed. "Folks, this water still tastes like Stone Creek Hollow." A cheer went up. Tiger was the first to drink, leaning over the well edge, splashing his patched-up overalls. As the sun dipped low, the area around the well was piled with gourds and jugs brought by the community. I was on my knees, trying to mend the broken fence into something usable, when I heard the clatter of hooves in the distance. Scarface Lenny was back, on horseback, with a dozen armed men behind him, their rifles glinting in the twilight. They looked like company police, or worse. I tightened my grip on the sickle and stood. The blood on my palm had dried and crusted around the handle, like a wilted rose. Lenny pointed at me, his face twisted in a sneer. "Ethan Miller, you got guts, mister. Blackwood says anyone who touches his well is a thief and a troublemaker, to be dealt with accordingly." The men behind him cocked their rifles with a chilling clack-clack, dark muzzles aimed at the crowd. The air grew so thick you could cut it with a knife. I held the sickle across my chest, its blade reflecting my face, stained crimson by the setting sun. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Tiger's hand, holding the dipper, shaking. Old Man Hemlock silently moved up beside me, his empty pipe tapping a rhythm on the limestone. The fire in 20 pairs of eyes now focused on my back, burning hot. I took a deep breath, kicked aside a piece of broken plank, and a cold, metallic laugh rumbled in my throat. "Dealt with, let's ask this well water whose name it answers to." Before the words were out, a sharp crack shattered the air. Mrs. Peterson held a jagged piece of her broken pitcher to her own throat, her clouded eyes fixed on Lenny. "You want to take someone? You take me first. This old life of mine should have ended when my man died." Lenny's sneer froze for a moment. Then he waved his men forward. Their rifle butts scraped harshly on the ground. I scanned the crowd. Tiger had quietly swapped his dipper for a heavy stone from the well's edge. A few strong men had already moved to shield the women and children. A spark glowed anew in Old Man Hemlock's pipe bowl, flickering in the dimming light. I clenched the sickle, feeling the scab on my palm break open, fresh blood, warm and sticky, mixing with the evening breeze. Lenny's men advanced, the sound of their actions like death's chains slowly tightening. But then I heard the steady breathing of my neighbors behind me, a rising and falling rhythm. Suddenly, I remember being 7 years old, a summer night just like this, the whole village out with torches, digging this very well, the firelight turning the water into molten gold. That water was clear and sweet then, every scoop holding the hopes of Stone Creek Hollow. Now those hopes were caged by Blackwood's fence and his guns. I shook the sickle fiercely, flinging droplets of blood into the dusk, then stomped on a piece of wood marked with a B, the heat in my chest about to burst. Even if I die here today, this well is going back to the people of Stone Creek Hollow, and it'll answer to our names. As I spoke, Lenny roared and signaled his men to fire. In that split second, Old Man Hemlock threw his burning pipe straight at the nearest gunman's face. Sparks flew, the man screamed, clutching his eyes, and his rifle clattered to the ground. Chaos erupted. Tiger heaved his rock, smashing it against another gunman's knee. I lunged at Lenny, sickle whistling through the twilight, aimed for his twisted face. Lenny fumbled for his sidearm, but I kicked it from his grasp. It skittered far across the stones. He drew a hunting knife, slashing wildly. The blade grazed my shoulder, a searing pain. I twisted away, and my sickle swept out, hooking his ankle and yanking hard. Lenny crashed onto the well platform, his head hitting the limestone with a sickening thud. His eyes rolled back, and he went limp. Seeing their leader down, the gunmen lost their nerve. Some fired blindly, bullets whining over our heads, shattering dead branches in the oak tree. In the confusion, Mrs. Peterson and other women charged with their broken pottery and hoe handles, their hoarse cries mixing with the men's shouts, exploding over the well. I snatched up a fallen rifle. The barrel was still warm. I swung it like a club at an advancing gunman. Tiger had found a rope somewhere and, with other youngsters, was trying to tie up the dazed Lenny. Moonlight reflected in the well water, mirroring the struggling figures, a crumpled, blood-streaked canvas. Just as the fight was at its fiercest, a loud, urgent ringing of the old church bell pealed from the direction of the hollow. Then, torches appeared at the edge of the woods, a fiery serpent winding its way towards us. The fighting stopped. Everyone turned. Elder Johnson, the oldest man in Stone Creek Hollow, leaning on his hickory staff, led 20 or more grim-faced men, armed with hunting rifles and pitchforks. Silas Blackwood has pushed this valley too far. Tonight, every man of Stone Creek Hollow is here. Let's see who dares touch our ancestral well. The men behind him roared their agreement, their makeshift weapons pointing skyward. Blackwood's remaining thugs, seeing the odds, turned and fled into the darkness. Later, Silas Blackwood tried to use his connections with the county sheriff in Oak Haven to have me arrested. He put out a warrant with my name on it. I had no choice but to hide out in the Blackwood Mountains. And Abigail, bless her heart, searched for me for 3 days and nights, carrying 2 pieces of cornbread. Her cloth shoes were torn to shreds, her feet blistered raw, but she smiled when she found me, pushing the cornbread into my hands. Ethan, I brought you something to eat. In the winter of '37, felt like the world itself was on edge. Blackwood, backed by some big logging company from out of state, made his big move. Their men, like a swarm of locusts, started clear-cutting towards Oak Haven, roughing up anyone who got in their way. They were called company men, but folks called them Blackwood's Devils. I, along with 20-odd fellas from the Hollow and nearby farms, decided we weren't going to stand for it. We took to the Blackwood Mountains to fight him, a kind of resistance. Before I left, Abigail, 3 months pregnant with our first, clung to me, her eyes full of tears. But I steel my heart. If we lost our land, our way of life, what home would there be for any of us? If we didn't fight these devils, life wouldn't be worth living anyway. Abigail knew she couldn't stop me. She just pressed a new pair of sturdy work boots she'd made into my hands. Come back safe, Ethan. I'll be waiting. Our little band fought a shadow war in those mountains. One time, we ambushed a supply convoy heading to Blackwood's main camp, captured 3 bars, Browning automatic rifles. We were just about to move to a new hideout when one of our scouts came tearing in. Ethan, Captain, Blackwood's men have surrounded Stone Creek Hollow. My heart stopped. I took them in, and we force-marched all night. When we reached the edge of the hollow, Blackwood's thugs were dragging folks out of their homes, demanding to know where I was, trying to force Abigail to talk, their rifles menacing her. She was holding her daughter, barely a year old, trembling all over but her jaw set tight, refusing to utter a word. I raised that bar and let loose. The lead thug's head, well, it just disappeared. The rest of Blackwood's men scattered like quail. When Silas Blackwood heard I was back with a well-armed group, he knew his game was up in Stone Creek Hollow. He sent feelers out, trying to make peace, even had 2 chests of silver dollars delivered to my yard one night, begging for mercy. I dumped the silver out in the dirt, right in front of all our neighbors. Silas Blackwood, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, your accounts for what you've done to the people of this valley are due. The reckoning, that's what we called it. It swept through Stone Creek Hollow like a spring flood, washing away the old bitterness and bringing a hope for something new. The village green was packed. Faces were alight with anticipation, a buzz of hushed voices telling stories of years of frustration. On a makeshift platform, behind a scarred wooden table, I stood. I wore my good Sunday suit, a bit faded but clean, standing tall. My gaze was steady, serious, as I held the papers listing Silas Blackwood's exploitations. I looked out over the crowd, and my eyes softened when I saw Abigail in the front row, holding her little girl. Our daughter, with her curious big eyes, waved her tiny fists at the excitement. Abigail watched me, her expression full of trust and pride. She wore a simple calico dress, washed pale but still neat, her spirit shining through. In her mind, Silas Blackwood was the man who'd brought so much misery to the Hollow. Today, he'd finally answer for it. I cleared my throat, my voice low but carrying. Today, we are here to settle accounts with Silas Blackwood. A hush fell. Silas Blackwood, I began. For years, he controlled our well, denying water to families. In drought years, he hiked prices, forcing folks to trade their last sack of meal for a few buckets. How many children fell sick? How many families nearly starved? Angry murmurs rose. Someone shouted, "Time he paid. The greedy devil." I paused. He grabbed land, paying pennies on the dollar, or tricking folks with loans they could never repay, leaving families with nothing. You worked your fingers to the bone, and most of your harvest filled his storehouses. An old man, his hair white as snow, shook with rage, tears streaming. My few acres. He stole them. My family's gone hungry for years because of him. One by one, I read out Blackwood's misdeeds. Predatory loans that ruined families. Hiring thugs to intimidate and harass. With each charge, the crowd grew more incensed. Abigail held our daughter tight, tears in her own eyes. She hadn't suffered directly like some, but she'd seen it all. Watching me stand up for our neighbors filled her with pride. She whispered to our daughter, "Look, child, your daddy, he's doing right by people. You grow up to be like him, honest and strong." Our little girl nodded, as if she understood. Finally, I raised my voice. A man like this cannot be allowed to prey on good people any longer. Today, Silas Blackwood pays his due. Thunderous applause and cheers broke out, lasting for minutes. Under the watchful eyes of the entire community, Silas Blackwood was escorted away, his face a mask of terror and despair. He wasn't harmed, but his power was broken. His ill-gotten lands eventually returned or made communal. And in that moment, I was a hero to my people. Abigail looked at me, a radiant, happy smile on her face. After things settled, a new era began for Stone Creek Hollow. Word of our stand somehow reached some important folks, and I was even offered a government job, way off in Washington, D.C. Abigail took my hand. "Ethan," she said, "this soil, this water of Stone Creek Hollow, it raised us. It's in our blood. Let's stay here." So I stayed. I became the town marshal for a while. Then later, as Oak Haven grew, the county sheriff. Years passed. I grew older. Abigail gave me 5 children, 2 boys, 3 girls. She always said, "Kid from Stone Creek Hollow, gotta be like Mountain Laurel, tough enough to withstand any storm, pretty enough to make you smile." Our children grew up. Some became teachers, others honest laborers. Our youngest son even joined the army. Later, Abigail and I helped raise our grandkids, enjoying the simple pleasure of their laughter filling the house. As she got older, Abigail loved to garden, and she always had a cat or 2 around. I let her have her way with those things. Last December, Abigail passed away in her sleep. On her nightstand was the red ribbon I'd given her when we were young, faded now to a pale, dusty rose. I touched her photograph, remembering her as a little girl by the cook stove, and the tears just came. A week after she was gone, I was going through her old cedar chest, the one she brought with her. At the very bottom, I found a blue cloth bundle. Inside, neatly stacked, were 5 pairs of hand-stitched work shoes. The uppers of the eldest pair were embroidered with tiny wheat stalks, for the year he graduated high school. The second pair had patched soles, the stitches big and clumsy, telling of a night she must have rushed to finish them. The smallest pair still had a loose thread, probably meant for a grandchild yet to be born. Underneath them was a yellowed piece of paper. It was a note from 1942, during a lean year, about how to stretch the acorn flour for biscuits. Save half for Ethan, it read in her shaky hand. He'll be hungry when he gets back from patrol. From the day she came to us at 5 years old, those hands of hers never stopped. During the reckoning, when I was busy with community meetings, she, with our third baby barely a month old, sat by the kerosene lamp sewing quilts for the families who'd lost men fighting Blackwoods enforcers. If the needle pricked her finger, she'd just pop it in her mouth, a bead of blood soaking into the blue calico, unconcerned. Those men shed their blood for all of us, she'd say. This little bit is nothing. During the worst of the Depression, she'd take the children to scavenge for wild greens and berries. Her feet would be cut and bleeding from walking through rough fields, but she'd cook up every scrap she found, making sure we ate, while she'd often make do with broth. Once I found her crying softly by the empty meal bin. When she saw me, she quickly wiped her eyes. Just a yawn, Ethan. Look, those ears of corn hanging from the rafters? They'll see us through to spring. She never raised her voice or a hand to the children. When our youngest boy was about 10, he swiped some green apples from old Mr. Henderson's orchard. I was ready to tan his hide, but Abigail knelt down, took his chapped little hand. Son, she said gently, remember how your daddy fought for that well, for all of us? Miller folk, our strength is in our bones, in being honest, not in sneaking things. Then she went to her savings jar, took out the few coins she'd hoarded, and had him take them over to Mr. Henderson to pay for the apples. Years later, when that boy went off to the army, he wrote in a little notebook, Mama's words are like the stones of our well. They look hard, but they feel warm. The hardest time was after a big shootout with Blackwoods out-of-state enforcers. I was badly wounded, laid up for months in our leaky little cabin, unable to work. Our eldest came down with a raging fever, talking nonsense. Abigail carried him, walking nearly 20 miles through the hills to the clinic in Oak Haven. When she came back, her shoes were worn through, her feet blistered and bleeding on the rough track. But the next day, she took the last handful of white flour we had, rolled out noodles, and told us kids the men from the logging camp had shared their rations. That night, I felt her feet. The blisters had broken, raw and festering. She just squeezed my hand and smiled. Good, she whispered. My soles will be tougher now. Won't slip so easy. The day she left us, it was so quiet. The day before, she'd been sitting on the porch steps, shelling beans, talking about making spicy pickled beans with bacon when our grandson came home from college. That night, I woke to see her by the kerosene lamp, mending one of my old work shirts. Suddenly, her needle faltered and the ball of yarn rolled to my feet. Before dawn the next morning, she was just gone, asleep, leaning against my shoulder, her hand still clutching an unfinished woolen sock, a tiny scrap of red calico, shaped like a wildflower, pinned to it, just like the one she used to tuck in her hair when we were courting. At her funeral, all 5 children came home from wherever life had taken them. Our eldest carried the brass thimble she'd used for 30 years. Our second boy held the little blue quilt she'd wrapped 3 of her grandbabies in. Our youngest, the soldier, had a service medal on his chest, tied with a bit of red string she'd twisted for him herself. As the folks carrying her walked past the old well at the edge of the hollow, someone set off a string of firecrackers. A tradition for her own folks, she'd once said. It startled the sparrows from the big oak. I suddenly remembered Victory Day in 1945 when the war ended. She was at this very well, washing the grime and powder stains from my face with fresh water. It splashed on an old scar on my chest. Tears fell from her eyes into the basin. Ethan, she'd whispered, next time there's trouble, don't you be the first one in line. The children are waiting to hear your stories. Now, the dogwood by the well is blooming again. I often sit on the old millstone where she used to sit, my hand resting on her mending basket. The blood pressure pills our youngest daughter sends are still on her nightstand. The enamel mug holds her favorite chamomile tea, cold now. But no one calls out at dusk anymore. Ethan, wash up. Supper's ready. I can't bring myself to wear those shoes from the cedar chest. I'm afraid I'll wear them out, and then I'll lose the memory of her humming some old folk tune as she stitched, afraid the tiny embroidered wheat stalks will fade, and I won't see her face, squinting in the lamplight, trying to thread a needle. Last winter, going through her things, I found she'd started letters to each of the children, but never finished them. Just little notes. Your father's stomach ain't so good. Don't let him eat cold biscuits all the time. Your pa likes his blue work shirts, so an extra layer on the cuffs. Your daddy kicks the covers off when he sleeps. Remember to put an extra blanket on him when you visit. She'd stitched her whole life into these tiny things. Even at the very end, she never complained of pain, just said, "This life with you, Ethan." The water from our well was always sweet, and my heart always had a steady kind of hope. When the spring wind blows now, I hang her old blue calico dress on the line to air out. The hem lifts in the breeze, and for a moment, I see her standing in the sunlight, holding our first baby, the big oak we planted 30 years ago behind her, its shadow dappled on the ground. And I almost hear her laugh and say, "Ethan, look at this life. It's like the water from our well. Looks plain and simple, but when you drink it down, it's all sweetness." The sycamore leaves outside the window have fallen another layer deep. I touch that old Colt, 45 part. It's like I'm back in those days of fire and struggle. Abigail, are you doing okay over there? When this last leaf falls, I'll be along to join you. Our life together, Abby, it was worth it.